Good morning. How are you guys? Good? This is a full room. Sorry if you had to search for a seat. We're glad you're here, though. Hey, if you've got your Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 2, the very first book of the Bible. That's where we're going to start in just a minute. We're going to jump around a little bit, so the scripture will be on the screen. You can take the back of your program and take some notes if you want. Listen, if you have the Bible app on your phone, you can go to events, go to the three little dots, go to events, and then if you just do that and your location services are turned on, you'll find Cane Bay, or you can search for Cane Bay, and our message notes are in the Bible app every single Sunday, if that's helpful to you. All right, so let me ask you a question. Oh, I forgot to do something. First of all, I have to invite you to something. This Wednesday night, right here in this room, is family gathering. Now, if you don't know what family gathering is, it's just a time where we just get together as a church family. And so it's a potluck. Bring your favorite dish or side dish or dessert, and we're going to share. We're going to eat together. We're going to worship together. We're going to hear stories of what God's done in our church. And we're just going to get to hang out, hear behind-the-scenes information of stuff that's going on in our church. And so you're welcome to come. It's a fun time. We only do it 4 times a year, so it's this Wednesday night. Mark it on your calendar and be here. All right, let me ask you a question. Have you ever watched pharmaceutical commercials on TV? Like for Jardians or what, I don't know, Soliloquy, or I don't know what the drugs are. Like, I don't think that's one. I think I made that up. So here's the thing. So I noticed this the other day. I was watching these drug commercials, and I noticed the scenery, like the video behind it. First of all, well, the one thing is at the end, they give all the side effects, and you're like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so have you ever noticed kind of the video, the scenery of what's going on in the back of these commercials? Like, there's either somebody like sipping coffee by a fire, or jogging in slow motion on the beach, or laying by a pool sipping a margarita, or sailing on a boat, or dancing and laughing with friends and enjoying all this great food. And they get to the end of the commercial and I go, I want that. Like, I need that medicine. Like, they're selling me something in the commercial that I want. And I don't even know what the drug is for, but I'm like, but if it helps you live a life like that, I'm going to tell my doctor. So what exactly are they advertising and selling? Well, honestly, I think they're selling something called Sabbath, and they don't even know it. Here's what I mean. That may be a new word to you, but it's an ancient Hebrew word called Shabbat. It's this ancient practice, and it actually means rest. It means stop or cease. Think about that for a minute. It means rest or stopping or ceasing from your worry, from your anxiety, from your toiling, from your busyness. And that's what's happening in those commercials. And I go, that's what I want. They know, because deep in the human heart, we all want it. We all want it. And the irony is, it's not going to come from a new medication. I mean, it doesn't mean you don't need that medication, but it's not going to give you Sabbath. It's not going to give you joy and peace and rest. You see, I think that comes from an ancient rhythm that God built into us and into the world called Sabbath. And we're going to talk about that over the next 4 weeks. And we're starting today. We're calling this series Practicing the Way, Sabbath. And listen, this isn't the only discipline that is practicing the way. The way is following Jesus, and I don't know where you are in all that, but as we talk about what it means to follow Jesus, there are disciplines to following him, things that we do in our life, and disciplines are good. They're intentional things. You know that. If you work out, you know it takes discipline. If you eat healthy, you know it takes discipline. If you manage your money well, you know it takes discipline, right? It takes work. It takes discipline. And this is one of those disciplines of Sabbath, and it's one that I don't even think we understand completely. I don't even think we understand it. Now, this series comes from, the structure of it is based on a book that just came out last month called Practicing the Way. Now, notice the subtitle, Be with Jesus, Become like Jesus, Do as Jesus did. So it's all about following Jesus. And so if you don't have this book yet, and you probably don't since it's brand new, if you're interested in spiritual disciplines, Sabbath being one of them, this book is full of them and it's great. We're going to be doing a couple of more disciplines over the next year or more. And so if you want that book, go to Amazon and get it. I think it would be helpful to you. I love the way this guy writes. And so we're going to kind of be taking a cue from this book about how we need to recapture this principle of Sabbath. Can I ask you a question? Another one? Here's a question for you. Do you ever feel tired or worried? You're laughing because it's kind of like asking, is the sky blue? Like, come on. It's just a part of our life. And we've settled for the fact that it's just normal and we ought to all just be that way. We're all exhausted and anxious, and that's the world we live in, and we're just like frogs in a kettle. Why are we like that? And why have we settled for it being normal? There's a few reasons. First of all, I just want to give you a couple of reasons that I think are really interesting to notice. One, we sleep less than anybody ever has in all of human history. Science tells us this. Research tells us this. Throughout most of history, people sleep when it's dark. Did you know that? Like when the sun goes down, that's God's way of saying rest. We don't do that because we have lights and electricity and TVs and phones and video games. And so we just don't do it anymore. I mean, and really, guys, this has only been in the last 100 years that we've kind of forsaken this. We stay awake when it gets dark. The average amount of sleep a person slept 100 years ago was 10 to 11 hours of sleep a night. You know what it is now? Just over 6. Almost half of what it used to be. We're tired. And we don't even realize that that's happening because it's just normal. Everybody does it. But it's not just our bodies that are tired. It's our minds and our souls. It's our minds and our souls. If you thought about this, in the last 30 years with computers and smartphones and devices and streaming TV services, and it helps us devour more information and stay more connected than anybody ever has been in history. And we like it. It's a frog in a kettle thing again. We've just gotten used to it. But think about this. Through videos, through news, through social media, through texting and more, we're taking in more information every day than exponentially than anybody previous to us has ever taken in. Our brains are on overload. We carry on more conversations through texting and social media, exponentially more than anybody has ever done. You can't even manage how many conversations you have a day. But it's normal. Everybody does it. Your brain never takes a break. Never takes a break. It's not just the notifications, the news, and the noise, though. There's more pressure. Psychologists say this, there's more pressure than there's ever been on any previous generation. And I don't know where it all comes from. I think the cost of living and our expectations to live at a certain level of living. We got to have a house like everybody else. We got to have cars like everybody else. Our kids have got to look like everybody else. Our clothes, like we live at this standard of living, and the cost of it gets more and more, which requires more work and more time and more energy to maintain it and keep it up. And then we have social media comparison, which causes image and status expectations on us that we can't meet. So you think about it, we sleep less, right? We consume more information and are in more conversations than ever before, and we have this expectation, this pressure that we can't live up to. No wonder we're tired. No wonder we're worried. Guys, that's not normal. It's not okay. I know it's the world, but I don't think we were designed to carry that and live that way. Imagine your phone battery for a minute. Look at this image. Does this make you feel panicked a little bit? Come on. Like you see it and you go, where's my charger? I got to, some of you know how this feels, right? So what do we do when we see that on our phone? Well, we go, okay, we got to recharge. I got to find a charger. I got to plug it in. We don't know how to do that necessarily with ourselves. We know how to do it with our phone, so let's take a cue from our phone. So imagine this. Imagine that 100% charged. We feel comfortable when it's that way, right? Imagine that 100% charged for you equals abundant life that Jesus promised. Because in one translation it says, Jesus says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy you, but I've come to give you life and give it abundantly. Another translation says, to the full. That's battery full. That's full life. That's abundant life. And Jesus says, I've come so you can have that. Full power, 100%. So imagine 0% is dead. When you get down to about 5% battery life in your own life, even if you know how to evaluate this for yourself, what we tend to do is we tend to like get quick hits to try to recharge real fast so we can keep producing. So think about this. You know what Apple says? Now, I don't know about Android developers, but Apple says this for your phones. It says that that's not a good way to charge your phone. That you charge your phone and you plug it and let it go to 100%. Put it down and let it charge. You keep using it while it charges, it's not good for your battery. If you keep unplugging it and trying to go more, it's not good for your battery. It's not a healthy way to recharge. And they say this, sometimes regularly, you ought to turn it off and restart it. When's the last time you did that? I don't even know. Like one time my phone was doing crazy things and my son goes, have you restarted it? And I went, what? How do you do that? So think about it for just a second. When our battery in life gets low, we've learned to just live on low power mode. You know what I mean? We've learned to just live on a limited power. And then we try to recharge with quick hits instead of real rest and recharge and renewal. We often try naps and Netflix and coffee and candy and energy drinks and endless scrolling. But when those don't work, we opt for more unhealthy habits or escapes. But the weariness and the worry, they just don't go away. And I think it's because we have forgotten an ancient practice called Sabbath. God said, stop, cease, open your hands, and rest. And we go, well, I don't know how to do that. Listen, I just want to tell you, this is really interesting that I'm preaching on this today, because I think this is one of the hardest spiritual disciplines for me. I think I'm very accustomed to the way the world lives. And you know what's crazy about it? Is I planned this series last fall, and then the elders offered me a sabbatical after 7 years of being here to take a sabbatical after we had a hard year this past year. And I decided, my wife and I talked, and we decided to take it, and I mentioned it last week. It actually starts tomorrow, Monday. So 7 Sundays, I won't be here. You know, the interesting thing is, I had no idea I would be preaching on this subject. I didn't plan it this way. I would preach on this topic the day I start my sabbatical. That's God whispering to me, Will, listen to me. So if you need to hear what God's saying to you, tune in for a second. Tune in, listen. God may need you to stop and cease what you're doing so you can see what He's doing. Genesis chapter 2. Look where this comes from. Genesis 2, starting in verse 2. It says, on the seventh day, God finished His work that He had done. And He rested on the seventh day from all His work that He had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all His work that He had done in creation. It's like it says it over and over again. If you didn't catch it the first phrase, God rested from His work. From all He had done, He rested. What did God do? He rested from all His work. Listen, I read this years ago. You know this. You probably heard this verse before. But can you speculate on this? Just think about it a minute. He's God. He is all the power. He is almighty. He's creator. Why did He need to rest? I mean, really, I've thought about this before. Rest for me growing up, I have to admit something. When I was growing up, I thought rest or surrender was a sign of weakness. I thought, strong people, smart people, powerful people, they just keep producing. They don't give up. They don't give in. No rest for the weary, right? The early bird gets the worm. Those kind of mantras, just seem so true to me. After all, my grandmother used to say, the devil doesn't get a day off, so I shouldn't either. And then I thought one day, a few years ago, who cares what the devil does? He's not my example. Jesus is. And Jesus practiced this. God rested. That's crazy. You know why I think he did? Because I think rest is a divine thing, a regular rhythm of life that God designed, not just for you and me, but for him too. It is a rhythm of life. Think about this. Think about this for a second. Our day is how many hours? How many hours is in a day? 24 hours, right? 24 hours. Do you know what that's based on? Where do we get the day from, the 24-hour day? Anybody know? This is a science class for a second. It's tied to the Earth's rotation, right? So we know that's how long it takes the Earth to rotate. The month is tied to what? A month is tied to what? The cycles of the moon. In fact, month comes from the same word we have for moon. Some of you are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. The cycles of the moon. The lunar cycle dictates our month. The year is based on what? Not our rotation, but the Earth's journey around the sun. Isn't it interesting the rhythms God built into creation? But where'd the week come from? From this. It didn't come from any other cycle in the world. It came from what God said. God said 7 days. I worked for 6, and I rested on 1. And every culture on the face of the planet has practiced a 7-day week. You know what's interesting? The last time that any society attempted to change the 7-day week was in 1793 during the French Revolution, where some smart people decided to attempt to make it a 10-day week to increase productivity. Here's a quick answer. It didn't work. No pun intended. Some of you got that. It didn't work. You know what happened? You know what happened? People quit their jobs because too much was demanded out of them. And then they felt purposeless. And then there was a rash of suicides. You can look this up in history. There was mental illness. There was emotional unhealth. There were divided families. It didn't work. And it's almost like we're continuing to live that experiment in the French Revolution. Not by government fiat, but like a frog in a kettle every day because it's just what we do. Have you ever noticed, though, the rhythms that I just mentioned in creation? There's more of them. There's more of these kind of rhythms of work and rest. Think about day and night. I mean, just think about the sun and the moon, waking and sleeping. It's as if God designed us to work and then rest, right? Leaves. In just a month or so, leaves are going to sprout and flowers are going to bloom in the spring, and they're going to grow and everything's going to get green. And then in the fall, they're going to fade and they're going to fall. God put that rhythm in creation to show us there's a time to grow and produce, and there's a time to rest and sleep. The ocean tides, the crashing waves, even music. When we had music right here, there's a rhythm to music. Do you see the rhythm? There's a rhythm to it. If it didn't have any rhythm to it, like it wouldn't sound that great. And then there's also rest in it. There's quiet moments. There's stops. And if it didn't have that, it would just sound busy and loud and clanging. You know what? Put your hand on your chest for a minute. There's a rhythm inside your body. You feel it? Boom, 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 boom. And as you're doing that, even your own inhaling and exhaling, there's a time to breathe in and then breathe out. It's like God wired it into our souls. God has given us a rhythm. And when we ignore it, you guys, when we live without this rhythm, when we go against Sabbath or rest and we think we're going to produce everything and we're going to keep it all going, we go against the rhythm God designed us for, and then we get out of sync. then we get off rhythm. And what does the heart do when it gets off rhythm? It's not good. What does your breathing do when it gets out of, it's not good. What does your life do when it gets out of rhythm and out of sync? And when you ignore what God said about the rhythm, how you should live, it's not good. There was a recent medical study that was done by a hospital group on a large community of Christians who practice Sabbath. Now, the interesting thing I'll just go ahead and tell you is they were a little more legalistic about their practice of Sabbath, but they were worth studying. Like they did this 6-1 rhythm religiously, like legalistically. And the study found that actually, in spite of their legalistic bent, that they actually, according to a lot of questions they asked them, seem happier than the average American. And their life expectancy, curiously, now this was a smaller test group, but their life expectancy was about 11 years longer than the average American. And so I was very curious as to what was the cause. Was that Sabbath, their practice of Sabbath was the cause, or there was other factors too? They couldn't really figure it out, but one doctor pointed out that if you add up all the Sabbath days over the average lifetime of America, of an American, it equals about 11 years of time. So he theorized that every day you Sabbath, according to this study, adds a day to your life. Every seventh day that you Sabbath. And I read that and I go, I don't know about all that. The point is this. This rhythm of 6 and 1 that God modeled for us is the way that God designed it for him, and then he tells us it's how he designed it for us. It's like the rhythm of breathing and sleeping. It's the Sabbath rhythm of our souls. And we need it. And if we don't need it, we'll sound like that. Seriously. It's so important that last week when we finished the series we were in called The Way, and we were going through the book of Exodus, it's in Exodus too. We just read the first book of the Bible. It's in Genesis, God said it. And then in Exodus, we get to that, and when God gives the law, he says it too. In fact, it's in the 10 Commandments. The first laws God gave to his people. Last week we looked at this verse. Look, Exodus 20, verse 11 says this: "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock." Oh my gosh. What? My dog, my cow, what? "Or the sojourner, any guest with you, any visitor who's within your gates, they are to rest." Verse 11, "For in 6 days," he's pointing back, saying, the reason I'm giving this law is because it's wired in. It's the way God created. "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that's in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy." What does holy mean? He made it right. He made it complete. It's the way we are designed to be like this. It's not just a good idea. God here puts it in the law. It's the fourth commandment in the 10 Commandments. It's the fourth commandment. And the interesting thing is, by word count, it's the longest commandment by word count of all the other commandments. Now, here's the crazy thing, is none of us would look at the other commandments and celebrate breaking them, would we? I mean, you think about it. Murder, lying, stealing. We know we're lawbreakers. Like, we know we are. But we don't celebrate breaking the laws. But this one we do. This one we're like, I'm just busy. Things are just busy. What if somebody looked back and says, "So you're breaking the fourth commandment?" Yeah. Now, Christians have debated for a long time whether this law still stands. They've said, is it a binding command? And I've even asked that question. Like, are we still supposed to do this? Like, I don't want to be legalistic or anything. And so I say, do I still have to keep this? Do I still, I have to really, one day a week, I have to just not do anything? And I don't know how to answer that completely, but I will say this. Because, Jesus came to fulfill the law. We don't live under the law, because we live under grace, and Jesus has kept the law for us, and we're lawbreakers, and I realize that. But it doesn't mean the law's bad. So I'm just trying to figure out, Like, where is this place? But you know what I think it's kind of like? It's kind of like the law of gravity, right? You acknowledge it, you know it's true, but nobody ever said, like, do I still have to abide by it? Well, I mean, I don't know. You can try to work against it, but it's not going to work out for you because it just is. It's just wise to embrace it. You can try to jump as high as you want, basketball players. Gravity's still at work, right? I think this is the same way Sabbath is. It's like, is it still a law? Well, yeah. God designed the universe this way. God designed you this way. You can embrace it or not. I think we should look at it like this. There's a guy named Wayne Muller who's written a lot about Sabbath. And he said this, listen to his quote. He said, the Sabbath is not a burdensome requirement from some law-giving deity. He didn't put this in the law because it's just an extra rule for you to follow. No. It's not some burdensome requirement. You ought to, you better, you must, but rather a remembrance of a law that is firmly embedded in the fact of nature. It is a reminder of how things really are. Listen to this, the rhythmic dance to which we unavoidably belong. It is recognizing the rhythm God put in your soul. Do you notice that this commandment started with remember the Sabbath? Remember. That's the way the law is stated. Remember the Sabbath. Last week we took communion in here. We had 4 tables. If you were here, you went, and you've probably taken communion before. You go up to the table, you take a little piece of bread, you take a little bit of juice, and you go back to your seat, and you remind yourself as you take that of what Jesus has done for you. It's a calling to remember. And none of us walked there and went, well, I don't think we should be legalistic. I mean, I don't think I have to do this. Well, no, I mean, you don't have to, I don't guess. But like it's calling you to remember something. And when you do it, you don't see it as a legal thing. You see it as an opportunity. I get to remember what Jesus did for me. I want to take it all the time. Like I want this to remind me of what matters. That's the way Sabbath is. It's not that you have to, it's that you get to. It's the way God created you to do it. To the legalist religious people that made it a tool to judge people by, Jesus said this, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. What Jesus is trying to tell you is this is not just an obligatory rule. The Sabbath was made for you. It's good for you. It's not a burden. It's a blessing for you. So what do we remember on the Sabbath? If we're to remember the Sabbath, if this is so important, what is it supposed to do for us? Well, here's what I think it does. Here's what we remember when we Sabbath. We remember that God made us and everything around us, and we didn't make it, and we don't own it, and we don't control it. Can a rest do that? Can a day a week, like sitting aside and just stopping and ceasing, can it do that? It can. We remember that God is powerfully in control, so you don't have to be. How many of you struggle with control? Like you just can't, you feel like you're just trying to keep it all together. Listen, one day a week, what if you stopped and you said, God, I can't and you can. I release it to you. We remember when we Sabbath that God is not all that impressed with my work. And I don't know if that makes you feel bad, but listen, He loves you completely already. You don't have to perform for Him. We remember when we Sabbath that God is the source of my satisfaction and my joy. Nothing else is. Let's be honest, though. If you are like me, the thing I struggle with is I think it's good, I just don't think it's all that necessary. I think it's sometimes a waste of time. And that's just me confessing that to you. That it's hard for me to stop, cease, rest, and just remember because I think about all the things that I'm not doing. Why is it hard for me to Sabbath? Why is it hard for you to Sabbath? I think it's this lie. It's that we think we can produce what God has already promised. I just want to say that again because this is what God's teaching me right now. We think we can produce what God has already said He would provide. One of Jesus' most famous invitations is in Matthew chapter 11. And it's a verse that has just been ringing in my head this year. Matthew 11, verse 28, Jesus says this. He says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Another translation says, "Everyone who's weary or burdened." Are you tired and worried? Are you weary and burdened? This invitation of Jesus says, I want you to come to me. I want you to come to me so I can give you rest. I want to give you rest. I see you spinning and worrying and working and trying and comparing and controlling. Just come to me, Jesus says. See, here's the interesting thing. I don't think Sabbath is just about stopping and ceasing something. I think it's about pausing and letting go of all your toil and all your worry and just coming to Jesus. See, it's not just about a day of the week. It's about learning to stop and unburden yourself and hand it to Jesus. And that takes discipline. That takes practice. In fact, look at the rest of Jesus' invitation when we unburden our shoulders, when we take off the worry and the work that we're toiling with, and we hand it to Jesus. Look what he says. Verse 29, he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus says, you can stop what you're doing and what you're carrying and what you're worried about. You can hand it to me, and you can take what I'm offering you, and it's so much lighter. And then, in verse 28, he promised to give us rest, but in verse 29, he said it's rest for your souls. You know what I think? I don't think it's really a time problem or a sleep problem. It might not even be a mental health or medical problem. I think it's a soul problem that keeps us from this. I believe this, that when we come to Jesus, not just when you believed in him, but regularly when you come to him and you unburden yourself and you stop your worrying and your work and you say, Jesus, I'm just here to be with you. When you decide to stop being Martha for a minute and you choose to be Mary and you sit at his feet, something happens. Like something happens in your life, and it will change your life. It will lighten the load on your shoulders. It will make your heart more grateful. It will open your eyes to see beauty you're missing. It'll fill your lungs with the most refreshing air you have ever breathed. It will make your work that you're toiling at much more fulfilling and fun. And it's all about this practice of Sabbath. It's not about one day a week that's different. It's about when you do that, it changes all the other days. Walter Brueggemann said this. He said, people who Sabbath live all 7 days differently. So what should we do? I don't know. You tell me. If Sabbath means stop and cease and rest, then there's probably something we need to stop doing. And I think you have to decide what that is. I think we need to decide right now. I just want you to just talk to God like quietly as I'm talking to you. God, what do you want me to stop? What do you want me to cease from? Or what do you want me to lay down and rest from? Listen, I just want to give you a couple of ideas on this. I want you to consider something. I want you to consider God literally for what he says. I want you to literally consider, what if I set aside a day of the week where I stopped a few things? Now, listen, again, I'm not trying to be legalistic. I'm trying to rediscover a practice that I think is helpful. What if there's a day of the week, and I don't know what day it is for you, I don't know that matters, but where there's a few things that you just stopped. And you go, well, what day? I don't know. Well, what should I stop? I don't know. What is something that takes your energy and attention and focus and robs you and depletes you? And you just need to every week say, I'm going to lay this down, God. What if first thing you think of is your job, whatever that is, whether you work in the home or out of the home or wherever. So yes, you need to figure that out. You need to figure out when do you lay it down? When do you stop? When do you turn it off? When are you not on call? Like, when are you not thinking about it? I don't know. What will you go, well, what will happen? They'll fire me. Maybe. You are trying to produce something that God's already promised to provide for you. So if they fire you, they fire you. No, that's easier for me to say, but I think there's something bigger at play here than what you can produce. Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's your phone. Guys, when do you turn it off? And what if you did every week for an extended period of time? And it was no longer a distraction. Me just saying that might make you feel a little panicked, and if it does, that's probably the one for you. Maybe it's your social media. Maybe that control and comparison thing is just maybe scrolling is a way for you to just kind of numb everything. Maybe there needs to be a 24-hour period every week where you say, nope. Maybe it's cooking and cleaning if you feel like a Martha and you try to keep it all up, appearances and image, and maybe one day a week you just need to let it all go. Maybe it's a habit that you've created, an unhealthy escape. Maybe it's something like caffeine or nicotine or alcohol or something else. And you need to say, God, I'm going to let this go. Listen, stop and cease. Just talk to God about it. Just ask the Lord. And I'm not going to tell you what to replace it with yet. I'm just talking about just stopping, just ceasing weekly. We'll tell you what to replace it with. The Bible has some suggestion for that in the rest of this series, but right now, just think about making space. Just making space. Because before you can grab onto something else, you have to let go of what your hands are holding on to. So what do you need to let go of? All right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand up with me for a second. I want you to open your hands just like this. Open them up right in front of you. Come on. Now close your eyes. Just be still for a moment. Just think about your heartbeat, the rhythm that's there. Think about your breaths. Inhale and exhale. God created you like this. God made you. He knows you. He loves you. He's right, and you know it. So would you just listen to what he's saying to you right now? Would you just give him permission to speak to you and tell you what you need to stop, what you need to lay down, what you need to rest from? Would you just whisper to him in your heart, Father, would you help me rest? Father, would you help me let go of control? Father, would you take this burden, this worry? Would you help me set aside a day every week when I lay some things down for that day? Some things that are robbing me of joy. Some things that are stealing my attention and my focus. God, would you take that away from me? Lord, I need your help with this. I need your help. God, I'm willing to practice it, but would you help me? In Jesus' name. I pray.